Welcome to the second part of my hot rod tutorial where we will be continuing our highpoly engine. Um, I talked about the other parts we're going to add detail to, and right now I'm just looking at my reference a bit more to see where I'm going to pick up where we left off last time. As I said, at the top we still have to create the carburetors, and the carburetors are the parts of the engine that mix fuel and air together to finally eject it, well, not inject, before it gets transferred into the engine and it gets ignited to actually power the engine. So those carburetors are on top because the mixture will be compressed by the supercharger that sits beneath it, and fuel is inserted into these carburetors, air goes through the big scoop at the top, and this comes out at the bottom as the compressed mixture that goes into the engine. So these carburetors are actually the most complex part on this engine model, which is why I'm not going to postpone it too long to start with it, because you should understand. Well, for me, this is the case. If I have a really difficult part of a model that I'm not so sure how I need to do this, I mean, it's really, I can't really see myself doing it in front of me all that clear, then the best thing to do is get it done as quickly as possible, because if you don't, it's just gonna drag along. You're gonna keep postponing it, and well, in the end, you might even lose interest in the project and it might not get done. So here I'm creating the structure. Well, these are these little blocks that extrude from it, used to connect to the supercharger. I'm mostly going by that reference picture because it clearly shows how the connection part, what it looks like. This part is actually technically still part of the supercharger, but it doesn't really matter since I'm creating it as a separate part. No way I'm going to model this in one connected piece. So there you go. There's no easy way of selecting all these parts. Most of it you just have to click manually. There we go. It looks easy on 200% speed up, but it's a bit tedious to select. Alright, so this is a rather complex block structure. We need to add some more edges in here to harden things up. There we go. It's easier if you do it by two. And since the distance between two edges, where I'm doing a connect between, it varies all the time, I also need to vary my connect distance. So if they're really close together, you need to lower the amount quite a lot. There we go. Some parts I can't forget. And yeah, see at the top I forgot that I also need to harden that bit, so I need to add another one over there. Another part here. For such a structure, I really need to add a lot of them. It's not really hard, just can't forget to do them. The ones on the inside, they look a bit rounded too, but that's not so important because you probably won't see them so much. Mostly going by this one also. This one looks quite interesting. I like the shape. The sort of V-shaped things at the side. Looking for some more reference because I think this is a tough part. Also, it really helps to use different search terms in Google. It can really make a difference. Oh, this one isn't so good. Yeah, this one's okay, but it looks really simple, so I don't think I'll use it. Still, it doesn't hurt to save it to my reference folder. Continue searching a bit more. I'm just opening all these images in a new tab that I think are interesting. Adding 540 to it, since my engine's a 540, might help. Just be a little bit creative with search terms. Yeah, this one looks okay too. I think it's still a little bit too, how do you say, primitive in terms of shape and connection, so probably not going to use that either. Blower engine. Supercharger, it's another word for blower. You can see different stuff turns up all the time. So being creative with these search terms is quite important. That one looks good. Cracker blower. Finding a lot of similar stuff then. See what I dug up here. Wow, this one's interesting. It's a bit too square for my taste, but I'll save it anyway. This one's also the same square, simple layout. Yeah, this one's not bad either, but I like the fins on the back, but I don't think I'll add them. They're more 50s type than they are hot rod. This one's pretty good. Let's see, yeah, these are some nice detail pictures. Too bad they're super low res. Can barely do anything with that. So, Y-end seems to be another brand of blowers and superchargers. This one looks like an interesting picture. Yeah, this is definitely a keeper. That's the sort of stuff I was looking for. So you see, when looking for reference, you might end up getting to know brands, words, terms that can help you in your search. See, this one's just perfect. This is exactly what I needed. Some nice, clear, high-res views from every side. And it's all because I got to know this Y-end blower supercharger brand. This is the sort of stuff I need to build these carburetors. This one's a really nice picture too. You can see there's a lot of wires running around on that thing. I'm not going to make those because, well, first they're hell to bake, and second they're just going to up the pulley count way too much. And you probably didn't notice on the final result image that has been shown alongside the tutorial. This one isn't so cool. Looks more like the thing you'd put on a boat or a dragster, not really on a car. Well, I'll save it anyway. You never know. Maybe even if I want to do a later project, it could come in handy to save any of these ref pics. Because it's happened frequently that I remember when I started some project I needed reference, and I was sure I found this on Google searching for that term, but it turns out a year later it had disappeared and I couldn't find it again. Yeah, this one's great, really good. So we have our base plate here, and create that part on top. So there's actually two separate carburetor units next to each other. Takes care of better, more fuel that gets into the engine, since it's a really big engine, needs a lot of fuel. There we go. Use bevel to create this shape, something like that. So you see, these are like, simply said, tunnels through which air goes, and fuel is mixed with it to create a the exact fuel mixture of air and fuel. Because you know, something a mixture can explode if there isn't both air and fuel, an explosive component. So yeah, let's see. I want to turn this into a round shape, so I need to do a little bit of tweaking. Select those parts. I need to space them apart so I can get that nice cylinder shape. Well, semi-cylinder shape. I'm just doing it on site. Just keep selecting and using scale. Why scale? Because it works in 2 directions. There we go. That's starting to look nice and round. Harden things up a little bit. Add those connects. Then at the top, you notice that I'm not really exactly following one of these reference things. For the general shape, which is quite hard to discern from the reference images, I'm just going along creating something I think would work and would seem viable. You've seen this tunnel shape on the one I said that looked more like a boat or a dragster engine, so I'm sort of mimicking that, making the top cylinder a bit fatter. Same old trick, reusing details. It looks a little bit big for that side, so we're just going to scale it for that. Or we could just use it like this. Probably scale it though. There we go. Attach them. Whatever, we'll just leave them like this. And yeah, because if in real life there would be a little inset there to prevent the 2 parts from intersecting, but that's just too much work to model, so we're not going to do that. Make those a little bit smaller. Move that about. Just spacing these parts. See, it's totally logical to add these bolts here because the carburetors and that carburetor base plate actually bolt onto the superchargers. So adding details like this is an easy way to get it to look more interesting. You can see there's quite some bolts on these examples I have here. Also notice how the back from that one YN supercharger is really interesting. It has this fan radial shape of cooling fins. I'm going to add those for sure. Alright, so what I just do here, I deleted 1/2. Why? Since I'm going to make these carburetors symmetrical. And they're probably not symmetrical in real life, but I'm doing it anyway because nobody will notice, once again, and it saves me a lot of time modeling, saves me a lot of time texturing and wrapping, everything. So it's just pretty much a no-brainer for me to do it like this. It's definitely something to consider when you're creating real high quality art, especially in a company. You need to reuse and mirror and reuse texture space, mirror parts as much as possible, just to save time and to work more efficient. If you do everything unique, you're going to work on it way too long. You're going to have to use too much texture space, and creating your textures is just going to be too much work. So really is a big part of high quality workflow, just being efficient and doing things in a smart and thought through way. So it starts at the high poly, at the actual modeling. You need to think about the mirroring and reusing of parts. Sometimes if you do an extrude, parts intersect, so you need to fix that. This shape is mostly going to make it look more interesting. I'm going to add those V-shaped parts on it as well. There we go. I got this little bolt part here. Rotate it. Make them smaller. You see, I modeled this bolt once, and I just keep reusing it all the time. So we have those V-shaped parts at the side. There's a tube coming out of them. I'm not going to make that tube, but it'll be interesting to create them nonetheless. I also want to have this bevel type of shape on there. That always looks interesting in normal maps. Attach it. There we go. Look at that. That's starting to get somewhere. cylinder. I'm going to create that from the side here. This is going to be a little bit tricky to model, but it's nothing impossible. Some people who aren't really that proficient at modeling yet might be a little bit afraid of this kind of shape. How you would tackle two cylinders connecting at an angle. Well, it's nothing impossible, I'll show you. Well, first of all, there's a little bit of a radius difference between them, like that. Move these into correct position. Move that a little bit. And the easiest way for this is I'm going to reset my X-form. And voila, use a symmetry to create the intersection for me. Then I just collapse the symmetry, do a little chamfer there, and there we go. I've created this perfect intersection. Doesn't work all the time. Sometimes you have to manually align those things. I'd use slice plane there. It's probably an easy way to get those things to intersect. Just adding some small parts to make things more interesting. I deleted the backside. You don't notice that, but I do it most of the time. I almost never leave the backsides on parts that you won't be seeing. Adding some connects onto that part. Attach these together and attach of those parts together as well. Now let's have a look at it in Turbo Smooth. There, from a distance, that looks good. While it was a lot more simple to create than if I would go for the 100% accuracy route. Yeah, I'm doing the same thing here. I'm just going to attach these parts together and use a symmetry. It turns out not everything is aligned exactly on the 0 axis. I need to fix that. You can see me. Oh, there we go. It's probably my mirror that's not in the correct position. There we go. That looks good. Okay, so then we have our center part. Copy that to the back side. The back and the front carburetor aren't the same, so we're just gonna reuse the parts we created so far and then add some more to it. Let's see here. Hide the supercharger. There's a cylinder on top with some insets and bevels. That is the actual connection to the blower on top. Yeah, first we need to delete 1/2 so we can use it for symmetry later. You can just use connect when you're doing that on a cylinder. Yeah, first I do this inset. Why did I decide to do it the other way around? I've explained that to you before. If you do insets, extrudes, whatever, on half of a cylinder, you'll have the center of your extrudes and insets on the wrong position, the wrong pivot point. So it's best to do that first and then delete half. So there we go. Just have this simple shape here. Move it to the middle, attach, and also copy that to the other side. Try and align it nicely to the center. You see, those bottom parts of the carburetors aren't perfectly round, but who cares? You'll never notice. Yeah, I could tell that one was rotated in a strange way, so just use the rotate type in to fix that. There's this bridge connection part in between two carburetors. I don't really know why, but I don't want that space to be open, so I'm adding this part here. divide it into 2 halves, then delete one, delete the polygons you don't see, and there we go. Harden those edges. Add a few extras. That way we can add some detail to it. I have to admit, this part I wasn't really using any reference and not really that sure what I'm doing. I was just filling in with something that looks okay. And as you can see, I've got a big surface to fill there. Just add some more connects. Attach this part, and you see there's still some pinches and streaks there. I need to fix those. There we go, that's better. Now I'm drawing a line on here to fill this part up a little bit. Yeah, this line, I'm using auto grid to draw it, and it's still set to rectangular. It'll look better once I put it into there we go. Delete the insides of that line. Chamfer the parts that need to be hard. And finally attach it. There we go. Looks more interesting. Still, I think that surface is sort of empty. Might have to add a little bit more to that, but maybe I'll do that later. So right now I might focus on the back part, or, well, let's see. Looking for my reference. Yeah, looking if I can fill this middle part up a little bit more. Add some more lines to make things more interesting. You can probably tell that this is, since it's a more unreferenced part, not really the strongest part of the engine. But in the real carburetors, it's filled up with a lot of hoses and wires, and I could do that, but might get a little bit too tedious. And then again, on most views, this part is probably going to be like, what, 10 pixels or something, so it's really not worth it to put that much effort into it, I think. Duplicate that part. Oh, there we go. And I'm adding some cylindrical details here. Just doing some detailing on the cylinder, so it's not just a cylinder. Extrudes and insets to create a shape. Now I can add a few of these. Add them at corners. Why at corners? Because it hides the fact that they're just intersecting parts. So use a few of them to fill up the more empty parts. Increase the length on that one. And I can just attach every single one of them. There we go. From a distance it looks okay. The top isn't that interesting, but yeah, I'll just add some more detail there. I'm probably going to do an extrude or a bevel there. delete the inside. Really need to watch out for that. And I want to move the inside in so it looks like a bevel. Add some connects so the edges are hard. Yeah, that's better than just flat. So it's not the strongest part of the carburetor, but it'll be the least visible part at least. All your attention will be going somewhere else, and in the end result, you'll really have to squint and zoom in a lot before you can see that, so it's fine. Okay, so now I'm planning to create this part at the front. You see, I start from primitives a lot because it's just faster. I'm creating a first blocky shape of what I think should be there. There we go. Move that to the 0 point, and do another one of these bevel type shapes. You see, there's some problems with doing this in a symmetrical object, but then again, it's not that hard to fix it. There we go, chamfer lines to harden up things. You really need to place a lot if you have these extruded blocks, but then again, it's not that much effort. You can see it goes quite quickly if you have the hotkeys down also. I want to duplicate some parts over there, and here something strange was going on. I don't really have a clue what happened here, but if I rotate this, it gets squashed. So you see, really strange. I'm detaching it to an element, and then it looks correctly. So I think what's happened is something has happened to the scaling of the object. See, it got scaled wrongly. That's why you should watch out with using the scale tool on an object level. If I just reset the X form, collapse it, then everything should be fixed. It's a little problem with the symmetry there. I need to lower the symmetry threshold. There we go, that's fixed. Set some parts to 0. And this is working nicely now. So if you would ever encounter that problem that you rotate something and the proportions seem to change, well, then it's just a scaling problem. Not so hard to fix. I never had this before, since I really tend to stay away from scaling on an object level. You might have seen me do it. If I scale an object, I go into the edit poly, select the element, and scale the element. I really try not to do it with an object, but then again, it can happen if you're not paying attention. Here I'm adding a little chamfer in between because since these two parts are bolted onto each other, I think there should be like a seam in between them, so that's what I'm creating here. Deleting the polygons on the inside. There we go, that looks better already. You can see that the scale, the frequency of the detail is a lot higher, well, it's smaller and a higher frequency of detail on the carburetors than on the rest of the engine. This is really because it's like that on the car. Like I said, the carburetors on real cars, the carburetors are the most detailed part of the entire thing. Yeah, and something went wrong here. This one, since it was attached to the carburetors and I reset the X form, it got screwed up a little. The scaling changed, so I'm just gonna try and fix that a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, I'll just model a little bit extra on this. Look at the scaling later. I think it's not perfect yet, but I'll just model a bit first. Need to harden things up so I can add a turbo smooth there. This one really isn't a complex thing. Oh yeah, and you see me adding edges here that don't seem to contribute to the silhouette. Why am I adding them? They do contribute to the silhouette when you smooth it. It might get contracted or might slope a little bit too much if I don't add these buffer edges around there. So this is an interesting picture to go by. The blower valves, the holes in the front, I'll add those later. It's not for now. Okay, so carburetors are looking okay. I probably won't add too much to them anymore. I think they look fine. You see, I'm going away. I'm deviating from the that high-res reference I'm using for the main engine block. I want my blower to be different. Don't be afraid to combine reference. If you like one part from this one, another part from that picture, just do it. Now, here, what I'm trying to do here is on the back side of the blower. You can see there was this, how would I call this? This fan type of shape, which I really like. I want that on my blower as well, because if you look from behind or from in the cockpit, you have some interesting shapes to look at. And there are actually two cylinders, two circles next to each other, which have these fins running outward radially from their center, and they're connected in the middle. So you have this how do you call this, dog bone type of shape in the center. There's the Wyant name is on there in the front. At the back, but I'm not going to create that. Oh, and here I'm making the shape a little bit more interesting. I'm just going to use the symmetry on that so I don't have to model any parts twice. Symmetry, flip if it's going the wrong way. There you go, that's starting to look good. And now I'm just going to start creating those fins. This isn't hard, but there's some interesting workflow tips in here. The fins start off straight, but they round down at the end. The proportions of the back of my supercharger are a bit different than on the reference picture, but that doesn't matter. Those proportions aren't so important. As long as it looks and feels right with the rest of the engine, then it's going to be okay. So there we go. I've aligned the pivot to the center of the circle so I can create an array, and I'm just looking for the correct number to get these parts to rotate around. It's not 180. 210 seems about right. There we go. Need to up the count a little bit. It's a little bit annoying that if I type in a different value in count, the number differs too much. I'm just going to use 360 because it doesn't give me any headaches. There we go. This looks good. That one at the center needs to go too. And now I can just attach all these separate parts, and my symmetry will copy them to the other side just fine. Look at that. That's pretty cool to look at, right? I still think it's protruding a little bit too much from the back. I probably need to move them in quite a bit. You can tell because there's so much dark shade on the sides. I need to move them a little bit like that. Yeah, like so. That looks good. Yeah, one thing that's going to be a bit of a problem here is, there we go, I need to scale that up. I need to make sure my my fins don't intersect with the bolts at the side. Those bolts need to sit flush in between the fins. Yeah, there. I think that's about right. So let's have a look at that. That back looks pretty good already. See, by reusing a part and modeling some smart and interesting detail, I think the supercharger is about done. So there's this block shape at the bottom also, and most importantly, that block shape is not symmetrical. See, I'm moving away from the center. It's an asymmetrical shape. I'm adding that in there. Like I said, asymmetry makes a shape more interesting if you add that to it. A perfectly symmetrical shape would come off as a bit weird, so it's also slant like that. And I'm just gonna reuse the same these spring push rod type of things at the back there. Rotate them 180 degrees, move them into position. Just looking for how I would space them apart. I don't think I'll put them diagonally like that. Well, okay, I'll just leave it at that. Just reuse parts to make it look more interesting. So yeah, the back is starting to gain some detail. So what is up next? I've talked about it before. One major component of the engine that we really can't forget about, and I'm still looking on this this T-Bucket build website. One major component is the transmission. You see, power from a car needs to be transferred to the back wheels, and that's what the transmission takes care of. Well, first I'm looking for some more reference, since the guy talks about using a Camaro rear end, and I'm looking for interesting pictures that contain the sort of shapes that I like. Doing that same trick here, using lots of different search terms, car types, engines, and just saying, I like this one, the monster race transmission. I think I'm going to stick to that one most of all. They have a few here. I'm just looking. Most of the time they use the same pictures, so I'm just going to go with that. Some of these you can tell are a bit more modern. If they're more square with more detail, then they're probably for more modern cars. But whatever, any reference helps. Just save these. I'm looking for this reference because I don't feel confident enough to start this transmission from scratch without looking at reference. So to fix that problem, some googling. Muscle transmission, anything that could turn up with good results. Oh, that one looks okay too. See, it's a big generic shape, sort of a cone shape, and then there's some smaller detail running along it. So I'm just looking at my engine, thinking what will work best. Oh yeah, and a note: if you're using Windows Vista or any Windows, and you're using the image viewer, and you've got a directory open, you add new images to it, you have to close the image viewer and open it again to see the new images. So that's why I'm doing that. Here, this one's really interesting. I'm probably going to stick with that one a lot. This one not so. I think it would break a little bit with what I have as a shape in my engine. My engine is also an older type, and I don't want to add a newer type transmission to that. So that's the foundation for my transmission, a round shape, and converting it to an editable pulley, doing a connect in the center. Like I said, first I'm going to do the operations that require my pivot to be in the center, and after that I'll delete 1/2 and continue with that. Like so. Alright. First I'm creating the big general shape of the transmission, and then I'll just continue to add more detail to it. I want to get the proportions right on that. You have to note that this part probably won't be so visible since it's going to sit behind the engine, at the bottom of the car. It's partly hidden under the body, so I don't have to go too wild with details, especially on the top at the back, because that's just going to be invisible. It's going to be completely covered by the car. But I also want this engine to be something that can stand by itself. So if I make a render of just the engine, it looks interesting. You'll see more on that in a later part. So that's why I might add some more detail here than is actually needed. There's these interesting shapes on there. You'll notice I have tries here now. Yes, tries in my my highpoly mesh. That's not a problem if I know what I'm doing. I want the specific shape here, so I'm just going to stick to that. Yep, there we go. See, there's a little bit of pinching there, but I'm not going to worry too much about that because you probably won't see that too much. Sometimes you have to think, is it going to be worth it to fix these errors, or should I just leave them and people will barely notice them? Yeah, I'm changing this shape a bit on this transmission. Also, I should explain to you why this transmission has this specific shape. You have this big part at one end, and then there's a smaller part behind it. The big part that connects to the engine, that is where the clutch of the car is located. Because a car engine works like this. If you would apply the torque from the car right away to the rear wheels, like immediately click, it shifts over, then the engine would stall and would stop. You've probably, if you've driven a car before and you would just release the clutch at once, your car stalls and the engine will just stall and die. So the clutch is actually a torque conversion component that makes sure you can make the applying of torque shift smoothly onto the back wheels by gradually increasing the amount of torque that is transferred to the rear wheels. So the clutch works with two or more, well, it's probably more than two plates that move along each other. Most of the time these clutch plates will be inside oil, so that they move over each other, and the more you release the clutch, the more they will be pressed together until they completely grip into each other. So clutch is a part that can slide or grip into each other depending on how much force you apply to it. And then behind the clutch, when the torque is transferred to the rear wheels, there's the gearbox, because if a car would only have one gear, it wouldn't be that easy to drive. So the gearbox actually converts the torque by a ratio. But it's actually the rotation speed that it converts. So the gears are in the smaller center part of the engine, and then at the back they'll just be a connection part for the rear axle, which will go to the rear wheels. So you see, I'm creating these attachment parts with bolts at the back. And why am I creating these? Well, because the transmission and an engine are actually two separate components. If you paid attention and thought about it, in the website I'm following, the guy is using the transmission from a Camaro, but some other engine. I think it came from a Pontiac or something. So you can actually combine transmissions and engines because they are separate parts. They bolt onto each other. Not all engines and gearboxes will fit probably, but a lot of them will. So that's why I need to make this connection between them. And because these parts are dealing with a lot of power, they need to be connected very, very firmly. Hence all these bolts that I'm modeling here. You can see it's an interesting shape. This radial type of shape with the bolts protruding from it. I like the way it looks. Yeah, I just attached those two parts together, so I have one less symmetry to worry about. So this transmission isn't done yet. There's quite a lot of detail we have to add to it, but I think the big general shapes of my engine are here. I see lots of stuff that's attached to it. I need to model that. You notice once again my transmission is simpler in shape than what you see on the picture, but no one will notice. Yeah, and then there's this box type of shape that sits at the end of the transmission, and at that part it will connect to the drive axle. Something like that. That looks about right. We're going to attach that part and duplicate it so it looks like it's two of them bolted together. Yeah, one problem I have here is that my pivot isn't aligned with the orientation of these parts. Not much I can do about that than just manually compensate for it. As I said, it's a part you probably won't see too much, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. Add these bolts to it. You can see local axis in aligned correctly with it as well. That's starting to look okay. Still in the center, it needs a lot of detail. And looking at those other ref pics, I really don't see a lot of parts I can relate with that I think I could use in my gearbox easily, integrate them, make it work with my shape. So I'm just gonna stick with that one concept more. At the center, there's this box type of shape that follows the clutch housing. I'm going to create the same type of thing. In the real one, this would probably be connected, but I'm not going to bother with that. Just model them separately. There we go. Change the music a little bit and continue modeling. Adding some connects to that shape, and as always we're just going to attach it once we're done with it. It's starting to look better. We need to add a lot of these. We're absolutely not done with it yet. Another box shape. This one's going to be a little bit tricky to create. It's the same type of thing as I made on the top, just thinner and on the sides, so I need to model it again. Also because the shape of the clutch housing isn't perfectly round, it's gonna have to be tweaked to every place I add it. Delete the back side since you won't see those. I want a little bit of a hard shape there. Yeah, and of course I want to move it into the center of this attaching part. Tweak it a little bit so it fits. Align the pivot to the center of the of that thing, the gearbox, and you see now I created this one, it doesn't fit nicely. I need to tweak every part separately, which is a little bit annoying, but it has to happen. this one really needs to be tweaked into place. You see the shape is really different here, so I need to move it around quite a bit until it fits. There we go. Attach these parts, have a look at them. That's starting to look more interesting. Really getting this transmission feel from those parts. And those ridges they add on there are probably just for reinforcement, or they might be oil canals. Not sure. Alright, so what's the next thing we can add to this? Yeah, I'm gonna add some sort of shape at the end of those parts, just so they don't seem to end in nowhere. Delete the insides, like always. Add those connects. And just duplicate this part. You see, it's a really simple box with some connects for the highpoly, but it'll do its job fine for these for this purpose. And I'm going to duplicate those bolts. Just to make them look more interesting. This isn't so technically viable that there are bolts on that end, but who cares? From this distance it looks acceptable. Alright, just having a look at it from afar. This is really starting to look like an impressive engine, and hopefully everybody's been able to follow it this far and realizes this sort of thing isn't that super difficult to create. Right, back to the transmission. There's a whole lot of junk hanging onto it from the bottom. There's a cotter pan, an oil pan at the bottom that collects oil, and that's what I'm going to create next. Because this part will be visible because there's the two frame beams at either side, and this part will be visible in between it if you were to flip the car or whatever. I always like to create my cars so that they look good from any angle in any situation. So if your car were to be flipped over or whatever, it should look good as well. The same simple thing again. This cotter pan is two shapes attached together. Since you should be able to open this to drain the oil from the transmission, and it has this this big bevel type of shape, which of course we're adding. See again that annoyance of working with symmetry and then doing an inset on a part that's mirrored. You need to compensate for it by just deleting the polygon, selecting the edge, moving it to your symmetry axis, which if it is placed at 0 should be just one click. There we go. Attach this part. Yeah, that's a start. We can do something with that. Okay, so how do we continue here now? There's this round shape at the side and quite a few smaller details that look a bit harder to visualize, so I'll just start with that big round shape. Yep. Delete the inside and try and replicate what we see on that picture. It's got a few interesting shapes that aren't that hard to create. Some insets, some extrudes. Just alternate a lot between them. to the center. There. So you see me switch a lot between inset and extrude. You can do everything with bevel too, but then sometimes you lose the settings if you reset them. There we go. I forgot one connect here, so I'm going to need to add that. There we are. I'm adding a box there, because as you can see there's a little box shape on the top, so I want to replicate that. Delete the inside. That should look about right. I'm going to create more than a simple box shape there. Add my connects. Move the parts inside a little bit, and now attach these all together so I can see the result with a turbo smooth. There, that looks better too. And there's some more detail connected to it. Some bolts, some round parts. Reduce the number of sides. Even if you're working high poly, it's best not to increase the number of sides too much for small parts, because you'll barely notice that. And it could increase the poly count a lot if you're going to do like me with this part, duplicate it all over the place. Same type of shape. I could have reused it from somewhere else, but just to add some variation, I'm taking the 1 or 2 minutes to create another one. Like I said, I'm adding these on places where parts intersect, on corners, so you can't tell that much that they're intersecting. It looks viable, and it fills up these places nicely. I have no clue why, but some of these parts are at really strange slant angles, so I'm just doing the same thing and adding those as well. It's probably because of how the gears are inside there, or I don't know. That's looking better too. And there's this interesting looking ridge at the end of the gearbox. I'm just going to create that too. Yeah, I need to delete those parts since, like I said, we're working with a symmetrical shape. And add the connects there. If you've never worked with high poly, you'll probably notice that this is what you're doing most of all, adding those connects to harden shapes up. Well, especially with the mechanical high poly. There, makes the shape more interesting. Alright, so this video is quite long, so I'm gonna cut it short pretty soon, and we'll just continue from what we're doing here in the second part. We still have quite some stuff to add, so just adding these final bolts here, and I guess I'll see you in the next part.